Welcome, everyone, to the Nerd Journey Podcast, episode 112. We're joining you every week to talk IT career progression and bring you the advice we wish we'd been given earlier in our careers. I'm your host, John White, at VJourneyman on Twitter, joined by my co-host, Nick Cordy, at NetworkNerd_. Hey, Nick, how's it going?
John, I am highly caffeinated as usual. We're both pre-sales technical engineers with backgrounds in IT operations. We hope our career discussions will be vendor neutral, relevant across disciplines, and remain timeless. If you're enjoying our content, please drop us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you subscribe. And if you want to get in touch with us, tweet or DM at Nerd Journey. Ultimately, we're just two nerds on a journey.
A journey to virtual enlightenment.
So let's take a trip.
Awesome, Nick. Welcome back to our second half of our conversation with Caitlyn Bryan, where we promise we minimize the dramatic pauses in how we talk about things. Last week in episode 111, we talked a little bit more about Caitlyn's career path, like how she got into the technology field, and got the position that she got. We also talked a little bit about underrepresentation of women in tech, some practical applications of how that rears its ugly head. And this week, it's a little bit more about current events in her career, right?
Absolutely. Imagine for a second, John, that you had planned to take this parental leave, and then all of a sudden everything changes and you have to take it 2 months earlier than you thought. The world has to stop. Everything you were doing and working on has to change for you to focus on something else. It sounds exactly like what happened to Caitlyn to me.
Yeah, exactly. It's so interesting how you can plan for something and it doesn't matter what your plans are. Like sometimes the world just changes right underneath you. But we won't give that away. Let's get to the actual conversation with Caitlyn Bryan. I kind of wondered, the validity of even asking a question about balancing like work and family, right? Because I can't imagine we shouldn't have to ask the question because it's certainly come up when we've talked to men, like, how do you do that? Work, like family, taking care of kids. But when we ask the question of a woman, it's like there's all this overtones, right?
Yeah.
That shouldn't be there. In the past, I've advocated. I was like guys should take all their paternity leave, every single day, because it's the only way to destigmatize parental leave.
Yeah.
Right, is to say, oh no, everybody takes it. Everybody's going to be out. How has that experience been for you within the technology industry? Is it more of an issue, do you think? Is your perception that it's, better, worse? That's an open-ended question. I hope. It makes sense. Though.
Yeah, no, I follow. I think that there are a couple points. Is one, yes, take your maternity, paternity, whatever you qualify for. Also for, somebody that may be looking for a different company or looking at, jumping ship, check out their benefits online. VMware is awesome. I cannot talk about how amazing my leave was. So we have 18 weeks, paternity, maternity, doesn't matter. Whether that also goes for adoption as well. So super cool that VMware has thought through that. And then also, so I had a kind of crazy situation with my son, who obviously does not have my timing, showed up about 2 months early. So you think about the maternity leave, and he ended up in the NICU for a couple weeks while he gained some weight. So I had a kind of a screeching halt into my day-to-day on just even taking maternity leave. So I was planning, we were wrapping up the end of our fiscal year. So I had, my last customer meeting, I was actually looking back prior to this, trying to figure out when that was. That was January the 15th was the last time that I got to go on site with a customer. We were wrapping up our fiscal year, and then my blood pressure started to kind of spike, and I got into this really scary pre-eclampsia situation, which also no one really talks about. So I had no idea what it was, had to Google it, and then got put on bed rest like that moment. So I called my boss, and I can honestly say that VMware is like put family first 100%. So my boss, like I called him from the OB office, which probably tells you a little bit about my like work-life balance at the time. It was a little bit funky, but I'm calling in for my forecast. And I'm like, oh, by the way, there's this really weird thing, didn't even realize like the severity of it at the point, which might be a little bit on me, but, he said, okay, you're done, focus on you, go home, relax. So I was on bed rest for 3 weeks and then had my son after hanging out at the hospital for a little bit longer. So it was just surreal how fast that went. And, I thought, oh gosh, like you only have, like we were so blessed to have 18 weeks. Like that is not the case for a lot of my friends. And then paid as well. So awesome. But with our benefits, it was not, hey, your 18 weeks started as soon as you went on bed rest. So I was really nervous about losing that time, like when my son was big enough and strong enough to come home. But they paid for everything with bed rest as well as until he was out of the NICU. So I was off for a very long time. So about 6 months, which was incredible. Part of that was just like, the scariness of coming 2 months early. Part of that was, me internalizing like, okay, what's it going to be like? I remember reading, calling in to my boss, like checking on things because I was a little bit obsessed. And he was like, hey, you are done. Like he drew a very strong line of like, this is not your problem anymore. But, I was also reading like a book, it's like the What to Expect books. And, my doctor comes in and she's like, oh yeah, you can like go ahead and go to the next volume because you're having your kid today, so I was like, I don't even know what's coming next. And, it's like month 7. So, maternity leave, I think honestly, I was treated so well. Maybe part of it is like our culture to celebrate families and put family first. I know Sanjay, our COO, says, if something's going on within your family life, like your work life will suffer. So like focus on that first. And then my bosses at the time, like just awesome to be able to talk to and just like to kind of set me straight, because I think that not necessarily that my priorities were off, but I just don't think that I recognized like how much I needed to be pouring into, the reactive versus like in sales, like you're on 365, 24/7. If you're on a vacation, if you've got a customer that had a huge issue, you still need to be accessible in some ways. So for me, turning it off was super hard. So I had to like take email off my phone and, have like everything just kind of completely shut down. But I think from a maternity leave perspective, I was completely taken care of. I mean, VMware even like sends you like little diaper bags, which was so awesome. Because Henry was born on a Thursday. The following Sunday was when our baby shower was supposed to be. So you're supposed to get, like a diaper in your bags and I don't know, like an article of clothing, which I did not have. So shout out to Amazon Prime for, stocking the Bryan family nursery. But yeah, I think from my perspective, it was great. And maybe a little bit of that is, we've got a pretty young industry from like my manager's perspective, bosses, the engineers that all have kids or, maybe big families or just know our stance at VMware. But that was great to be able to like, completely power down. I will say I had a customer that, he said, I kind of feel like maybe you're going to be the one that's still on their cell phone, like trying to call somebody in, like on the way into the OR. And it was 100% true. Like I had a problem. So, I think that was kind of interesting. And I saw a shift dramatic shift. As soon as like Henry was here, it was like so much easier to power down. But at the same time, I felt like, oh, maybe it's a little bit like of a humble yourself moment, but you kind of felt like you were this warrior at the time. You're the salesperson. Like, how can the world live on if you're not, in charge and yelling at people or doing whatever you need to do? So that was a little bit of I guess the first little while, like after, things settled down and Henry was fine, we were home. I kind of felt like a little bit resentful, like how in the world could everybody be okay without me being in charge here? So that was a little bit of a moment for me to go, okay, we've got to figure out maternity leave, and, being able to take the full amount, was great. So I definitely encourage it. And I know that some people like to try and, hey, we'll take a little bit now and then we'll come back, maybe come back later on in the year. And there's so much that happens within that first moment. And it's so hard to like step away once you come back. I've seen so many different individuals that like tried to straddle the maternity leave, like, hey, let me take a big chunk at the beginning of the year, maybe a big chunk at the end, and then they never really find that exit moment that works for them. So that's a little bit of a bummer to see. I will say that my husband's company does offer paternity leave, but that was only 2 weeks, and we brought Henry home. The next week was when the pandemic, like the shoe dropped. It's like, oh, there's this thing happening. So, not having my family close by, not having access to friends, not having family to, go, hey, can you go and grab XYZ? So again, I guess shout out to Amazon Prime for keeping us fed and everything. But, it's wild to check in on your paternity leave, just from like a personal perspective. And then I would say, like, don't be afraid to put yourself first. Like, now looking back, I was like, okay, I had a little bit of weird things happening. Like, prior to the exit, I had executive sponsors lined up for all my top clients. I had, services that were going in. We had, XYZ done, and, an ongoing list. And I really made sure that everything was done. And then I look at like what I did in my house, and I had a crib here and I had a mattress shipped like on on bed rest. And so I'm like, all right, there's a little bit of that. And I think part of that was probably, not wanting to show that sign of weakness that I'm a pregnant woman who's about to like throw everybody off. But I don't think that was actually the case. I think that was more of me being afraid that I was going to be perceived as weak, that I was pregnant.
I think it is extremely hard for anybody to go from 1,000,000 miles an hour to just stop. It's almost like
it's a car
you
crash.
were in a car going 100 miles an hour and you hit a wall.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was it, I know you got along really well with your boss. Was there still some feeling of extreme anxiety, and will this be looked upon in a bad way when you had to make the call and say, hey, I got to take my leave now?
Yeah, I think it was more of, and maybe this is that moment where I realized like the show will go on. But I think it was more of, I fought so hard to get to where I was in my career. And, I didn't want, like, you hear these of like, oh, women will sidestep on their career and, not necessarily raise their hand. And, it's the whole like lean in mantra. And you think about that. And I think part of me was, I didn't want to like give up on the projects that we were working on and the customers that I had spent so much time and energy to like make sure that relationship was there. I didn't want anybody to skip a beat because I wanted to like be able to jump right back into what I was just doing. And so I think there was a little bit of that. I definitely had some reservations when it just came to like my coming out party as a female that was pregnant. So, I went to, it was right after, I guess, so I got to go to club, which was super cool. We, got to like experience a little bit of the world with France and Italy, and just like, you're whining and dining, you're having a great time. You come back a couple months later. I felt like there was this big disruption to the business when I was gone on vacation for an awards trip. So that's a little bit funky. But then, I came back, and during my first trimester, I like after a few months realized I was pregnant. First trimester, I was really nervous because, miscarriages can happen. There's an emotional roller coaster. Me, in my first trimester, I was so tired, and I was so ready to like eat anything that like had a sugar molecule on it. Like, so ices, or, chocolate donuts or whatever it was, which is a pretty dead giveaway. Like, that's not really my go-to. So hiding that was a little bit, surreal. And I was still first trimester, and it was VMworld was coming up. And so my husband and I talked about it. I was like, okay, I've got to do it. I had over 30 customers that are going to be there. I was hosting, dinners, and we had the happy hours, the concerts, like all of the things that come with a big IT conference. And then the week before was mentoring the university new hires. So you think about like that energy and that level, and I'm in my first trimester where I just want to nap and eat chocolate donuts, and that's like not okay when you're trying to like keep it under wraps. And so I remember like just struggling. And then after like I told some of my largest customers at the time, like probably a couple weeks out, maybe like 5-6 weeks into my second trimester, oh, by the way, here's my due date. And I happened to be, I was in my first trimester at VMworld, and they're like, how in the world did you do that? Like, it was a 6 a.m. start until like end of happy hour, whatever. And I was like, honestly, I don't know. It's just momentum. But I think that there was a certain level of fear that if I, decided not to go to the conference, if I decided not to go do the mentorship, if I decided to like take a step back at all and like listen to my body, be just tired and like hang out with a donut, then, I was going to like do a disservice of all the things that I'd worked for, which I don't necessarily know if that was true, but the fact that that crosses my mind might be a little bit of a shout out to where the gaps might be with just female representation.
Yeah, it felt true, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the important thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say that like every tech conference that I've gone to like that, I think the last few times that I've told Nick this, and I'm like, yeah, Nick, I finally like kicked caffeine, and I'm not drinking coffee or like diet soda anymore. And then I come out of like or VMworld, for example, and I'm like, oh, here's my 12th like Diet Dr. Pepper for the day or whatever.
It's such an unnatural, and everything's free, right? So like, why not grab the extra latte, the extra caffeine? So imagine not being able to have a caffeine because you're in your first trimester, not really wanting to like eat highly processed food. You can't have cheese, you can't have alcohol, you can't, all the things that like get you through those conferences. And you're like, okay, I'll just hang back with my hot lemon water and just hang out.
Caffeine and deep fried food are like the two things that you can get at a tech conference.
Yeah.
Well,
so
and
true.
very little sleep. You don't even have to order that one.
Oh yeah, no, that comes
Yeah.
complimentary.
You don't even have to be someone who's a big party person to have your day and night filled up. There's just so much to do that you could do.
Yeah.
I can't imagine doing that as tired as you were. That's insane.
Yeah, I did buffer in a couple of days in between, the university new hire. You're in this amazing part of the country. We had VMworld at San Francisco. And so I had my sister fly out for a couple of days, and we just like drove up and down Highway 1 and stayed in really cute, girly spots and just kicked our feet up and relaxed. Before I knew VMworld was going to knock me in the teeth a little bit. So it was definitely one to recover from, but I think the opportunity cost was too great for me to miss out. And I'm so glad I did go, because that was, I can kind of still have my moments with connecting with customers, your peers all over, the world or US. And then like also it's a great way to connect to your female brethren that might be spread out all over the place that you don't typically see, girls' night in a tech conference. And so we'll try and do something like that, like maybe a happy hour or something. So you get your fix.
That makes sense. Now, once you had your baby, I know you mentioned you had a little bit of a I can't believe the world's going on
Yeah.
without me.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to really be disconnected? Like, I'm okay with not checking in on this thing.
Honestly, I don't know if like I ever had that. Like I had to forcefully make myself take email off because it was so hard. I mean, I think that like if you've been doing this like in sales for so long, I mean, I remember one time we were at my husband's club trip and one of my clients had to have something immediately, right then and there. And we're in Venice and I'm checking on my phone and an Excel spreadsheet of a number. And my husband's looking at me going, what is happening here? And so I think that like maybe that was a little bit of that always on, but it took a long time. I'm not gonna lie, probably about 3 months in, because I remember just, hey, I've got some downtime, let's do this. But once I did unplug, you realize that 6 months being gone in the tech world is like, it's almost like we live in dog years, right? So we live and breathe within a 90-day cycle. You think about how many companies VMware, I think we acquired 6 companies within 6 months. And so all of a sudden I get back, I've got thousands of emails. And then we have all these new companies, we've all got all these new, people. And I'm going, oh man, so I think a little bit of that was tough to kind of get back into the groove. But unplugging, I was pretty surprised actually, like once I officially removed the things. Like I think I even at one point I had to change my workspace one password so it wouldn't auto default to everything, and then I just tucked my laptop away because I was just so tempted to see like what was happening and like let me get real fired up. But I think that was it. It took a little while.
Did you have to have your laptop charger taken away from you? Was
Honestly,
that
I should have. That's
yeah?
probably a better thing is I should have done that. But I actually like repositioned like my office space so it wouldn't look as enticing, like you couldn't see the blinking lights, if you will. So I really did have a problem. Maybe that's another idea for how do you unplug when in an always on world. But I think that, once I was able to, it was so interesting. I started picking up, when Henry did not sleep one full night in until he was 5 months old because he was born at 3 pounds 1 ounce. So you think about a baby that tiny that needs, like, they don't sleep all night until like maybe 12, 15 pounds. So it took a very long time for us to put on those gains. And so I think that, when he finally was, at a stable point and sleeping through the night, it was almost time for me to come back to work. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I just, finally had my head screwed back on. So it was exciting to come back, honestly.
Now, is that an advantage, do you think, throughout his life? Because I can gain like 11 pounds tomorrow if I had to. But if you like are born premature, is that like, okay, I'm gonna abandon that joke.
Is this sashimi weight, John, or is
Oh
this
man,
something else?
if I could eat 10 pounds of sashimi, I would. But
Game on, game on. I mean, luckily Henry is, he took so long to get on the growth curve, but now he's like in the 60th percentile. So obviously we have done well. And it's kind of crazy because my husband was 11 pounds when he was born. Which I was freaked out that like, we were going to have this massive baby and nobody in my family had ever had pre-eclampsia. And, I knew one other person that did because it's something that's like not even talked about. It's like a taboo. and you can't really figure out like what happened. Nobody knows like why, or the reasons, or how to fix it, or if it's going to happen again. But when you think about, like, my husband was 11 pounds, I was 8.5, so I'm just thinking that, like, oh, we're going to skip to like 6-month clothing. I had nothing like in the preview section. I had nothing, like all of those funny things that thank goodness he gained some weight and started sleeping through the night. But it was pretty surreal, like how cute and tiny, like his head was like this big, the size of my palm when he was born. And he was just like, I don't know, did well.
It's nice to hear that he's on that growth curve.
Yeah.
Like it really is too bad. Like he'll, maybe you can tell him and he's like a chubby teenager and you're like, that first 11 pounds, like that was really tough for you. But
now it's like a rounding error.
Yeah. Maybe you shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
You know what? Don't do that. I've really rethought that position.
We'll scratch it.
Oh my goodness. So how about coming back? Like, here's the fear, right? That if I can articulate it, it's like a lot of times the fear is like, oh, they'll have somebody covering this and they'll bring me back, but in like a different position.
Yeah.
Like, oh no, like we replaced you. We have your job, but it's doing something different.
Yeah.
Any fears like that, like, or even if it's like irrational, like managing that kind of fear?
Yeah, I definitely, when I made that first call to my boss, and at the time I had the number one territory customers, so I was back to back number one in the company, which was awesome. But you think about, probably from like my boss's perspective, is like, oh great, so we're going to go from like all of this excitement to now like not having coverage, and me thinking, oh, I've let the entire team down because God forbid I take my maternity leave. So I think that there was a little bit of like that initial fear, and I had just this conversation, and I think he was super reassuring that I said, I don't care what you do between now and, when I come back, but I need a job, and I need, my same customers. So don't you dare do anything like crazy, and, kind of the scolding aspect. But yeah, there was definitely that fear that you're going to get maybe sidestepped if you take out a little bit extra time, or people are going to be doing different things, so I think that there was definitely a little bit of that. And then I think from my perspective, is I decided that it was a great idea. So it was within my 5-year timeline. So everybody writes out their 5-year goals and see how well they stick. And I'd worked really hard to be an enterprise field rep within 5 years of joining VMware. So I went from inside to doing another inside kind of specialty gig, and then field. And then I was on, I guess, the bench, you would say, for getting an enterprise role, which one did happen to open up while I was on maternity leave. And of course, like, maybe a little bit of sleepless nights, but, lack of coffee or something, your gears start turning of like, oh, what if? So this opportunity kind of came about where I had to call my current boss that was employing me and say, hey, who's kind of got one of my peers who I love here in Dallas covering my customers, and say, hey, there's actually this thing that opened up. It's part of my 5-year plan. I know it's a pandemic and I'm on maternity leave, and maybe it's not ideal timing, but I don't want to like miss out. Again, that like maybe irrational fear of like, oh, a baby will make you kind of step back within your career. So for me, it was like, let's steamroll ahead, so I had to get permission to like, if I can, could you afford to like reshuffle, is this going to put you in a bind? How is that going to work? Talking to HR, and then talking to the hiring manager of like, hey, so you have this brand new role happening here. enterprise in Dallas. It's part of my big, thing. And this is something that, again, maybe part of those like IT conferences and the kickoffs, and you start really networking with those individuals at those moments. So you really don't want to like miss out on a chance to connect with others. And so, I mean, for some reason, they decided that, yes, it's great. And I was able to like move forward with the interview process. And I remember trying to figure out a timeline where Henry, who was so tiny and so like, we kind of have like a free range child, like he kind of just does whatever his schedule is going to do. And we're trying to like structure it, but it's really not working. And so like figuring out when could I interview between nursing, between naps, and between like the dog barking because Amazon's dropping off another delivery. So like that was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. But it worked out. And so, that irrational fear of, or maybe not, I don't know, of, being replaced, actually, I replaced it with another problem, which was, okay, you're going to start brand new customers during a pandemic and you're field facing, but you're not probably going to see anybody for the next year. But I didn't know that at the time. So that was just another thing of like, what I wanted to do, but I was excited because I think that, and maybe that's an opportunity for people if just because you're on maternity leave doesn't mean you're on the bench, or like you are benched, if you will. You can still go out and look for different positions. And if your company allows you to make internal transfers or, promotions and that sort of thing, and you want to do it, you don't have a ton of time to do it. But like, if you are late night scrolling through things, definitely don't let maternity leave hold you back if that's part of your overall journey.
So if you had anxiety about going back before that, take the new role, and you definitely have some anxiety about going back into a totally new position,
Yeah.
right? New job.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that's definitely, something, and not that I've like figured out my groove. I've been back since August. And I'm still trying to find my groove, right? So I think you asked John like about the work-life balance. Like obviously before it was way tilted the wrong way of like, the job. But then now like you look and see, okay, I picked up new hobbies. I joined a book club on my street, which is like, everybody basically sitting around in their lawn chairs and discussing whatever we wanted to read. But then trying to like make a conscious effort to like pour my time and energy into a couple different things that weren't necessarily just the job or just being a mom. So finding a little bit more balance that way. But yeah, there was a lot of anxiety when I first started. I was thinking, okay, is somebody going to send me back to start? Like, we changed everything. Our customers, our operational tools, how do we quote things? We bought 6 companies. So there's a lot of change that happened in that 6 months. So there was a lot of like, I think initial anxiety when I came back of like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do anything. Like, is it mom brain that I'm experiencing, or is it just like the speed of things have changed? And so getting over that was, a lot of like me reaching out to people and saying, hey, is it me, or does the world seem a little bit more different right now? So I think that was something kind of interesting.
Well, that wasn't the only world that was different. I mean,
Yeah.
not that your world's not different when you're pregnant, but
Yeah.
once there's
Yeah.
a little human crying for mom and dad,
Yeah.
and you have to be the one to fix that, that's a different life
Totally.
entirely.
Totally. I actually like to the left of me is something for Henry's first birthday. So he turns 1 on Saturday, and we're doing a dinos and donuts theme. So the things that are on my desk that I never thought that I would have on my desk, there's a teething ring, there's a dino that's for his, little like donut giveaway situation. That balance has kind of been a little bit interesting to navigate. And then we're in a pandemic. So, the camaraderie that you have with your customers, the travel that, I'm used to. I was getting on a plane every other week and going out and visiting customers, or hopping in the car and driving however many hours it took to make sure that the job was getting done. And so adding that kind of a little bit of a different vibe, but then it's been a little bit of a blessing. And I feel like that's maybe unfair to say, but a little bit fair because it kind of forced us to slow down and to stay a little bit more local. And part of that role that I'm in now is less travel. So it's a little bit of me, wanting to hit those career goals, but also putting my family first, but that I can't, spread myself so paper thin like I used to. So yeah, definitely different. I mean, you guys have, I know Nick, you have kids. John, you have kids? Yes?
No,
No.
I do not.
Well,
My wife and I are in negotiations right now.
well, I know that all of us can relate to the travel,
Oh, yeah.
even just that and balancing whether or not you have kids or you have a dog or, you have friends, or family close by, doing that is a little bit wild.
Yeah, for sure. I have an 11-year-old now. Somehow
Yeah.
she's made it this far and she keeps growing. I keep asking her why she continues to grow, and she just says that's the way it is. But yeah, you have to balance. And, in your case, Caitlin, it's not like you can say, okay, mommy needs 30 more minutes, go watch one show real quick, and then we can talk about whatever it is you wanted to talk about. You have to address the need right then.
Yeah. We are not speaking yet. So, he kind of and I think he's got a little bit of my temper. So a little bit on the sassy side. So whatever he wants, it's pretty immediate. Plus, he's he'll be 1 year on Saturday. So the hey, hold please, let me adjust whatever I'm doing and then attend. Yeah, there's really none of that. So that's pretty wild. But we do have I don't know if anybody is familiar that maybe tuning in. We do have a what to expect app where it's free. You can join it, and it kind of a forums, if you will, of other moms or maybe other parents that are kind of going through different things throughout the month. And one of them that I read, I think it was 2 weeks ago or last week, and I thought it was so interesting. And it was the mom that was saying she needed a timeout. She needed a moment to I don't know, take a shower, be a normal human, have some lunch. And, part of that was a lot of the women kind of coming back and saying, well, the woman also, I think I don't know if she had a job or if her husband also did, but they said, have you asked, your husband to maybe hold the baby while you go and take a shower, or, kind of communicating within your own little team, if you will, of your needs and being able to put yourself first. It kind of goes back to the raise your hand if you have a problem, and that way it'll get addressed. So I thought that was so enlightening that, you have to be able to put yourself first. You have to be able to obviously take time for kids and family and, whatever is going on in the life. But my husband is awesome. And if I say, hey, I'm really frustrated, I want to go and hop on a Peloton ride and then take a bath or whatever it is, just some downtime, super on it. But you kind of have to ask for that, because I think as a woman, you automatically, that's a sign of weakness, right? If you need a break from your kids or need a break from whatever it is. So I think that's part of, learning to juggle, to ask, and to delegate, if you will.
Yeah, no, that's one of those latent things in our culture where it's if you're a dad and you're okay, I'm done being a dad for the moment, and I need to go sit in the recliner and put my feet up and read the paper. I'm always back to this 50s imagery, right?
Yeah.
That's totally acceptable, but mothers can't. That's not okay for whatever reason.
Yeah.
That we need to fix that.
Yeah.
Right? Obviously in our society, but
yeah, I mean, we got really lucky that we have a nanny that comes Monday through Friday. We're able to have her here at the house, and so the commute, I don't lose a whole lot of time during the day. I can hop on and do whatever I need to do, and then also I can schedule whatever. But it is so expensive, nannies and daycare and child support. So sometimes you have to just figure out how to take moments. for you, whatever it is. So, yeah, I saw this like, here's a meme or something, and it was about Americans versus, I don't know, whatever country, maybe it was somewhere in Europe. And it's like, Americans on the way to the hospital. It's like, I'm so sorry, I'm walking into the ER right now. Call you back as soon as we're wrapped up with a surgery. And then like in Europe, like, oh, hey, I had a family emergency, or, I'm having an emergency. Check in later. I think maybe part of it might be like where we live, not necessarily just like a gender situation.
No, that is true. Like, I don't, maybe was it Germany or something where they like made it illegal for work to like email you
Oh,
after
wow.
hours and on the weekends. I'll have to research that, see which country it actually was.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
We'll put that in the show notes if we can find it.
Yeah, that'd
But
be
talk
cool.
about
Yeah.
your 24/7, 365. Like, if you're if you were not allowed, like by law, to get email from your customers after hours,
Drive
like
me
that would be.
nuts. It would drive me so nuts. And I think them too, right? But maybe it would be a little bit better to,
It would be an
for
entire
all.
cultural shift.
Yeah, definitely different. But it would definitely like, I'd be like wondering what's happening. And I think especially like in tech, like you're going to have outages. People are going to like have downtime. They're going to like have an application rollout that is so critical that it launches directly when marketing says it's going to launch. And so there's a lot of things that just hiccup and happen. And that's maybe part of like why it's so hard to like turn off in this industry. But yeah, definitely would be, it definitely be a culture shock if you weren't allowed to have email.
Everybody talks about DR plans, but how often do we work on our own?
It's true.
Not that often.
It's very true.
Nick with the technical analogies.
Oh
That's
yeah,
right.
we should have one, and actually we do have one. Well, do you have that written down? Not really,
Like,
but we have
we have a
one.
suggestion of one. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's in the big red binder with all the dust on it.
Yeah. Somebody
If
put
we
that
don't,
together in like 2002, I think. It's good.
if we don't look at it, then emergencies won't
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah, exactly. So pretty surreal to think that like we also in our personal lives imagine the same things too.
Oh, it's exactly true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even the things that like are, you know, most likely to happen, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes it's tough to anticipate. Like what if I have a flat tire, like while I'm on the highway? Like what do I do? Like I guess I'll call like, roadside assistance. What's the number? No idea how to find it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Or do I know where all the COVID testing centers are around me that have a rapid test available? And something like that. It's possible now.
True.
But I want to turn the conversation just slightly. I was going to ask Caitlyn, as a relatively new parent, any advice for someone who is going into a new endeavor, a new role? You took on a new challenge as soon as your maternity leave was up, but you're also adapting to this new challenge at home. What advice would you give for building some rapport with those new teammates, the new manager, as you also have your own transition?
Yeah, so I think that just for me, my core engineer that started with me on this journey, he had been there for within the same customers for a long time. So, kind of just being honest of like, hey, here's what's going on here. Like, I kind of need a little bit of a crash course. So I think just being open of like, you don't have to have the answers on day one, and no one actually expects you to know what's happening until like at least week 4, maybe you'll get an idea. So I think that was kind of nice that like everybody understands. There's a lot of like people moving in and out of customers as well as like on vendor sides or however within tech. So I think a lot of people are used to like, hey, I'm new here. Can you tell me? But I think also trying to set up some sort of a cadence of check-in of like, hey, just to make sure that like you are aware. I mean, there's still like shots and, like all the kids follow up stuff of like, hey, there's going to be things that are going to be a disruption to our day or our week or whatever it is. So like sharing calendars and just being open with people of like, hey, I'm new here. I'm also a new mom. So any advice, and you would be surprised. Like if anybody asks you like, oh, what's your advice of like doing whatever, you're about to like listen to a very long novel of like, oh, do this and buy these products and whatever it is. So I think that that's just kind of comes naturally because we just want to help as humans. But it was definitely trying to leverage my teams as much as possible on getting me up to speed, and then being really honest on like where I was. I was like, well, I don't even know what this company does. Like, and now we own them, and how does this fit into things? And so I did use a lot of like our internal training resources, on my first like week or so back. Like the first week back was tough. It was, you're scheduled all these calls and it's like introductions through brand new customers who you have no idea who they even are until like, maybe week one or whenever it is. And so then you're trying to like take all these copious notes and figure out how to like provide value in step one, and remember all of the little tidbits of conversations about, which customers like which things and what not to say to who. And, so that was kind of interesting, but using your team, if you have one, as guidance. And then it kind of goes back to like picking a company if you want to go and do a new endeavor or doing something, picking somebody that's going to really embrace, a little bit of change. So that helps.
And let's not even mention the thousands of unread emails you had from being away, right? Everybody CCing
It
you.
was tough. Yeah. So the week before I actually came back to maternity leave was, I wanted to take a me time, but then I also like selfishly wanted just to like make it not look like I had been hanging out in a bathrobe for the last 5 months. Because let's get real, like that's kind of what my day was. Like I didn't really, I'm not getting ready for anything, and you've just got like I don't know, spit up on you, and you just don't feel like yourself sometimes. So right before I came back, I scheduled a haircut. I, went and did like long walks with my dogs. Like I had our nanny come a week early so that way I could have completely 1 week of just me doing whatever the heck I needed to do to make me feel better. So I had the luxury of being able to do something. So if you had that, or you can give that to somebody maybe who's going through maternity leave, like drop off some Starbucks for them and hold their kid for a little while, outside of like maybe COVID. That's some good advice. But I took that week and I Googled what has VMware been up to for the last 6 months and who owns what and where the biggest outages have happened. And I opened up that beast of my email, and I think I've mentally blocked it out of how many thousands of emails there were. But you get really used to like checking out filters and sorting it and, just trying to do the best you can to like kind of get through. But yeah,
Oh, you tried to go through that?
oh
Like
yeah,
my
oh yeah,
my my inbox zero instincts come in. Like if you have an unmanageably large like inbox,
yeah,
like you just move everything to a folder,
yeah.
and then if it was important enough, they'll reply to you.
Yeah, they're going to go, hey, where in the world are you? Yeah, but I
Yeah.
think it was me being curious, of like, oh, how did they, move on without me? Like, what's going on? I wanted to see how that project turned out or whatever it was before I like started smiling and dialing and checking in on customers. But it was weird because, I did go 2 months early. So a lot of customers like didn't even know, like, hey, so sorry, I'm on my way to the hospital, like something weird happened. And so then the next thing that they know, like, I'm not even their rep anymore because we had this really awkward transition where I abruptly ended my time with them and then got a promotion in the middle. So there was a lot of like unread emails and, projects that were happening and just interesting things to check into. So it was definitely weird, but good.
I also wanted to say, like, bathrobes and having baby spit up on you. That's like totally normal. I mean, that's my
Yeah,
day too,
yeah.
and I don't have a baby, so like, you know,
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's Yeah, you feel like real glamorous after a little while. You're like, whoo, this is interesting. Like yesterday, I had a little bit of projectile vomiting, and you're like, just casual Sunday. So that was definitely,
It's part of the Super Bowl party.
yeah, exactly. But I will say, like in prep to like maternity leave was uh just trying to get all my stuff taken care of for like not only customers, but do I have clean clothes? Do I have dry cleaning stuff picked up? Has the dog been groomed? Have I gone to my dental appointments? Like those kinds of things, like in a checklist that you kind of forget about. I'm glad I did because the entire universe shut down for a little while. So that was, in hindsight, pretty good. But yeah, you end up like really living in questionable sweatpants, and I think my UGG slippers probably have a hole in them at the moment. But yeah, that first week before I came back was really like, okay, do you have everything that you need just to feel like yourself as much as possible?
Now I'm thinking about a sweatpant gift box as like a maternity gift.
You should
Now I'm
totally do
thinking,
that. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, you should totally do that.
all right, all right.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to ask one more question, Caitlin, and I think we'll be close to wrapping. Um, so, based on your experience, how likely are you to take more vacation moving forward?
Huh. Definitely likely. I think that maybe putting up some more walls, and part of that's got to be like me including, my extended teams. Like, hey, when I'm gone, can you back me up? Like, we don't really do like backups. It's more of a reactionary, but if there's a way that you can do something to like lead up to it. I mean, my husband and I, like, we pretty early in our careers, we just poured ourselves. Like, we're both in sales, so we both have a very unnatural tendency to like want to be connected to the best service possible with our customers, or even like our peers or bosses or whatever it is. So we had a rule, whether it was like somewhere cool or just a couple days, like a staycation situation. But once a quarter, we took a week and we'd go unwind somewhere. But we found ourselves cheating and, actually working like when we were not supposed to be working. Like we were trying to like, oh, there's just this one deal or there's just one, thing that I need to do. So I think that like learning a lot of the world will continue to move forward, and it's going to be okay if you take a couple minutes and you might come back with just a fresh eyes, or and everybody needs that. Sometimes maybe it's not once a quarter, maybe it's whenever life permits. But you definitely have to take a little bit of time out so that way you can reset and then put the best self forward. So that's important.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Caitlin, for spending some of that valuable time with us
Yeah.
and our listeners, and getting some insights. We'll have to have you back. We'd like to walk through that, career timeline
Yeah.
and get some of those like lessons learned from inflection points too. But I'm really like I have found your insight up until this point has just been amazing, and so
Thanks.
I just am really glad that you were able to spend the time with us.
Yeah, and I had
Yeah,
a
thanks for
blast.
letting us sell you on coming on the show.
Oh my gosh, anytime. I think it's part of salespeople. We just love to talk about ourselves. So anytime you want to have me on, just let me know.
Awesome. Well, Caitlin, Bryan, thanks for joining us on the nerd journey. Really appreciate it again.
Thanks, y'all.
We heard a lot of undertones there, John, about this idea that pregnancy is a vulnerability that can be seen as a weakness to others. And it was challenging for Caitlin to go and ask for the leave that she needed to take early. And it was hard for her to work out in her mind as someone who was very successful in her career already will I be as successful? Will my job still be there when I get back? All this anxiety that kind of comes bundling with this sudden stop.
Yeah, it's so interesting to have heard that and reflect upon it afterwards. You know, it's, I think, very easy to want to keep your personal life and everything that is doesn't have anything to do with the professional life, like from like touching that professional life and how it's affecting, or might affect your performance, right? But like there's any number of like life events that can affect that, like whether you're having a child or adopting a child, or you have a parent coming to live with you, or you're dealing with one of your siblings having an issue. Like all of those things can um, affect you. And as much as it makes sense, like sitting on the sidelines and listening to that going, oh, you really need to like pick a company to work for that accommodates like part of your entire life coming with you to work, or not just part of your entire life, that accommodates you bring your whole self to work in every part of your life. Like you are a parent, you are a sibling, you are a child, you are a cousin, you are somebody's partner, um any number one or all of those things affecting your work. Like that's just important.
And kudos to Caitlyn's manager who was understanding enough to say, no, you're stopping right there. You don't need to finish all the stuff in flight. We'll get someone else to help you. He was able to orchestrate the coverage needed to make sure that those customers were serviced in her absence. And he really wanted what was best for her health and for her family.
Yeah, it was so great to hear about a manager who's willing and able to do that and execute and follow through and make her still feel valued as part of the team there.
And I think there's also this hesitation if you want to take a different job at the same or a different company to go to your manager and tell them what you're thinking about doing. In this case, she had a good enough relationship with her manager to say, there's this opportunity. It's part of my 5-year plan. I feel like I need to at least chase it down and pursue it. But I'm coming to you first. I think that's scary in a lot of different scenarios based on who your boss is, how good the relationship is, what the company is like.
Yeah, very true. Another good call out. I think that I think landing, listening back, a lot of that change that she was going through really landed with me in a way that I think in the moment I wasn't necessarily understanding that, one, she left before COVID, right? And all the changes that made and how we like work, and came back afterwards. So everybody else had a chance to go through that transition and she did not. Like her transition happened after coming back from parental leave. And then the other thing was like that, changing teams as she was coming back, meaning like where she was landing was on a different team in a different segment with a different manager, right? Like so that's a lot of change. And oh yeah, all doing that while having a child like that still wants some of your attention, maybe a lot, probably a lot. I'm assuming almost all.
Yep. Totally different way to approach your day to day versus what it was before the pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah. And she left as like she said the number one performing territory in her commercial team, and then to come back and start as in a completely different segment. It's very late related skills obviously, but it is also different, right?
Man, all I could think of is the Brad Pinkston episodes where he went through so many different changes, managing a new team of people and transferring to a new team of peers and different segment. And yeah.
Yeah, very very relatable, right? Very analogous situations. Awesome. Okay, well, we definitely want to follow up with Caitlyn as she lives through this transition. Maybe we can get a little bit circle back and get some more opinions from her, more perspective, more learnings, because she just seemed like super wise and able to like kind of digest what she'd gone through and serve up some nuggets.
Absolutely. Well, I guess I'll go ahead and close it out if that works for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just a reminder, we want people to subscribe and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. We want to know if we're being helpful and are always looking for interesting questions to ponder. We're collectively on Twitter @NerdJourney.
All right. Farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. I'm John White @VJourneyman for Nick Cordy @Nerd_, signing off.